Man, awesome guys. Well, I really appreciate y'all coming. I was not sure what the turnout was going to be today, like right after the new year. When Sarah and Carolyn were talking to me about this, like, well, we've got an opening, in February or one right after the new year, and I kind of tend to just go right into things. So I took the early ones. I really appreciate y'all coming. I know at the new year, it's got a lot of stuff going on. So anyway, my name is Mark Flood. I was the CTO for Gamerwall. We were an esports company, which we'll be talking about here. Full disclosure, I work in the industry. I'm all about the industry. But one thing that we ran into consistently with Gamerwall was that we spent a lot of time talking to investors and potential partners about the industry as a whole, and we wouldn't even really get into what we did in the industry. And so I find it helpful to kind of go through these talks like this just to kind of inform people on what's happening in the industry as a whole. I still think to some degree there's a little bit of a negative stigma around gaming, lazy kids, just gaming, whatever. And so that's kind of what this is about. So I was the CTO for Gamerwall. We were acquired back in October. My new project is Origin. We're not going to really be talking about that in particular today. This is just industry generic knowledge. So with that kind of being the groundwork, we'll hop into it. So this is the Wikipedia definition of esports. I rarely am going to quote this as when I'm talking to people about it, but as simple as you can make it, it's really just competitive gaming. Typically, you see it happening amongst professionals where there's actually money at stake. Where we're at today, there's kind of a build-up here. So the history is interesting. So starting back, I think in the first video game was created maybe in the late 60s, and then in the 70s and 80s you had Atari, and then Nintendo, and there were some pop culture things like that. The TV show Starcade, I don't know if you guys remember that. I barely remember it, but it was like a reality show where people would compete in Pac-Man and the 80s style games. They did a TV show and lasers and all that stuff. And then this movie, The Wizard, is one of the first things that I remember. I was born in 85 and The Wizard came out in 89, I think. I don't know if y'all remember that, but that was the first movie that was basically paid for by the gaming industry. Nintendo funded pretty much the whole thing. And it was when they released that Power Arm deal. So in the 70s, late 70s, Atari and arcade gaming was kind of becoming a thing. In the middle of the 80s, you had the cheesy TV shows kind of started to become mainstream when The Wizard came out. In the late 90s, you started to see actual land-based competitions. So when I was in middle school, I would actually compete in Counter-Strike tournaments. So I'd go to these cafeterias, and we'd line up 8 people on one side of the cafeteria table, 8 people on the other, machines all connected to LAN, and compete in these tournaments. I think we'd sometimes play for a prize pool of $1,000. And so that was really interesting. And then really esports as it is today really started being originated once high-speed internet started to proliferate. So there's kind of this theory around the Asian financial crisis. South Korea, after that crisis, really buckled down on their internet infrastructure and decided to make a concerted effort for economic reasons to create high-speed internet. At that same time, that allowed competition to increase over those same connections. And so subsequently, South Korea is actually probably the capital of esports, which is something we'll talk about more here in just a second. But anyway, so this is kind of what you think of gaming, or a lot of people do anyway, just beating your brother in Madden or Super Nintendo Mario. This is what esports looks like today. That's Madison Square Garden for League of Legends Championship. The arena sold out in 4 minutes once the tickets went on sale. So it's exploded into this huge, massive industry. And it's really, really cool and exciting. I love it, obviously. And so we'll kind of talk about what this, how all of this is happening and what's it about. So traditionally, you had game makers, and they would make money by selling games, right? So they'd sell a game for $60, and you go buy the copy of the game, and that was their primary revenue stream. What's starting to happen now is all of these external revenue streams are popping up. So specifically, people are creating their own content around games. So you can get on YouTube and Twitch, and there's just infinite amounts of gaming content. Some of these people have millions of followers. They're making tons of money doing it. And it's really great for the game developers because now they're not just solely reliant on an actual game sale to make money. There's all these external forces. So there's a lot of crossover happening between professional sports, music, celebrities that a lot of you guys know. Deadmau5, I don't know if y'all have heard of him, the DJ. Really popular DJ. He's at all like the big concerts and everything, but he's a huge gamer, has a big following on Twitch. Gordon Hayward is the newly acquired Celtics player who broke his ankle in the first game of the season, but he's an all-star NBA player, huge gamer as well. He's got a really large following, and then most recently, Post Malone, another, he's a hip hop guy, and same thing. Just it's kind of coming into the light and blending in with mainstream a little bit. So esports specifically is great for these is great for the publishers because it's this competition in their games, and so it's allowing communities to grow and people to get really, really actively engaged and involved with the industry. A really interesting stat is that there's way more people that watch people playing these games now than there are actually people playing them. So everybody loves up and to the right curves. That is not actually a real graph. We'll actually get into some real numbers here in just a second, but it's just trending in the right direction. It's a very valuable demographic, 18 to 24. High income earners. So whether or not you're actually involved in the industry specifically, like getting in front of those types of people is valuable to all sorts of companies, kind of independent of what they actually do. So the actual demographic that's involved is very, very valuable. And a lot of major companies that have nothing to do with gaming are getting involved for that reason. So these are real stats. I didn't make this. This is from a company called Newzoo. They kind of do general statistics gathering and things like that. They're probably the most popular one right now. But audience growth is huge, growing really fast. Again, way more people watch than play, which is just kind of an interesting phenomenon. And especially going back to that stigma I talked about, people just have a hard time grasping that. I compare it to regular sports. Way more people watch basketball than actually play basketball. Kind of the same thing. Revenue, same deal. Just it's exploding. One thing that I'll mention here in just a little bit, I think this actual graphic leaves out a specific section of the financial aspect. I'll talk on that in a second, but advertising revenue, sponsorship revenue, it's all piling in. This is kind of gives you an idea of like what it's actually piling into. So media rights, that's actually purchasing the rights to stream, or broadcast these competitions. Advertising, sponsorship, merchandise and tickets, the Madison Square Garden deal, and then the game publisher fees. Interesting about the game publisher fees is that a lot of these, what's included in that is not necessarily game purchases, but in-game purchases are now a thing. So you can buy loot crates and all these different things that allow the game publishers to earn additional revenue outside of the game purchase as well. So this graphic right here, it's a little bit old, but it's still the best one that I can find in regards to who is actually involved in the space. I think the most important thing that I'll touch on here is the actual major franchises. These are organically grown esports franchises. Most recently, the average purchase price for those has been about $20 million. So Ninjas in Pajamas, Optic Gaming, Team Liquid, Luminosity Gaming, Complexity Gaming. Those are some of the logos that are in that category. But there's a lot of people involved in the space and a lot of companies involved in the space. And these are just like a handful selection of ones that pretty much everybody already knows, but all those companies are heavily involved and are continuing to push out new things and ideas in the space. So who's actually putting money in? Basically, every professional sports owner has invested, either directly themselves or through one of their investment wings. Some of the major venture capital firms, that's a really small list. I would say there's probably 250 venture capital firms at least that have made investments of varying sizes all across the industry. I know, I'm going to probably say the name wrong, but Andreesen Horowitz, he loves it. He's very involved, as well as quite a few other names that I didn't actually include on the list. So what is esports actually? Like, we've kind of talked about the market and the numbers and all of that stuff. Like, what's actually happening on a micro level that's supporting all of this? Well, it's the actual gameplay itself. You can kind of break it down into a few different categories. You have your MOBAs, which is short for multiplayer online battle arenas, your shooters, your real-time strategy games, your MMOs, and your card games. I'm not going to get too into those, but in short, a MOBA is generally a 5v5 territory winning type of game. So League of Legends and Dota 2 are your most popular there, but basically you have five players on each team. They battle for position on the map and go back and forth. It's very strategic. You have to have really good teamwork. That's probably where most of the money goes to in terms of prize pools, and is also the most complex. Then you have your shooting games, your first-person shooters, third-person shooters. Call of Duty is probably the most popular, like common known first-person shooter. Interestingly enough, Call of Duty is actually behind in regards to creating like infrastructure around their league and stuff, but they're right there. Like in the next probably 6 months, they'll be there. PUBG is short for Player Unknown Battlegrounds. That's a brand new game, or at least in the last year or so. It's extremely popular. It's kind of like Hunger Games in real life. 100-man, last man standing, deathmatch on a huge map. Real-time strategy. StarCraft is by far the leader in that. If you've ever seen it, it's very similar to Command and Conquer, but online. MMOs, there's not really too much going on with esports in regards to MMOs, because the games themselves aren't necessarily that competitive. There's like little micro games inside them that can be competitive, but for the most part, World of Warcraft is the major player there, and you'll see some things in regards to that, but it may not even be in the top 10. And the last one is your card games. So if anyone remembers Magic the Gathering, Hearthstone is basically Magic the Gathering digitally. So people play, collect cards, they compete in these tournaments. There's big prize pools for Hearthstone tournaments. So these guys will create digital decks, travel to these tournaments, bring their decks with them digitally, and then compete with all sorts of different rules and stuff, and winner takes whatever. I'd say if you're actually interested in looking at the games, just go to twitch.tv. At any given moment, you can kind of see what's trending and popular right now. So that was a screenshot. This is a screenshot I took, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, with League of Legends being the most popular game, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, Hearthstone, Fortnite, and Dota 2. That'll tell you literally how many people are watching right now, and that's how they order it. So it's just a really good indicator of what's trending right in this moment. So I'm constantly on there looking at that, just because I want to keep my nose to the grindstone about, okay, what's currently popular and what's trending. So that's kind of a overview of everything. I do want to talk about for a second where I personally see opportunity. I'm not an investment advisor, so this is not financial advice. This is just where I personally see some opportunities for people to get involved. So at a really simple level is just the publicly traded companies. So ATVI is Activision Blizzard, and Tencent is a Chinese company. I think they're traded on the United States Stock Exchange, but it might be like you have to do it on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange or something like that. And there's lots of other game publishers that are publicly traded as well. So you can get a little piece of the action that way, which is really easy to do. I think the tier 1 opportunities are mostly gone. And what I mean by tier 1 is those really established high-level franchises like Ninjas in Pajamas or Complexity Gaming. Those have already been scooped up and purchased by the professional sports teams, major investors, all of that. For me, where I see a really huge opportunity, and I guess you could call it an arbitrage opportunity, is in the level right below that. So as new games come out and new leagues are created, they're going to need franchises to fill those spots. So there is no like public records or statistics that you can look at about what makes a franchise good or bad. So it's very much the Wild West, and if you know what you're looking for, there's some opportunity there to get involved with the team, either buy one, create one, invest in one, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, they're actually chosen to be in one of the upcoming leagues, and that just immediately pops the valuation up to right around that $20 million figure. If you are a non-endemic brand, so we talked about this a little bit earlier, so if you have any involvement with a company that's looking to advertise or market or get in front of this type of demographic, it's a really good way via sponsorships or just buying ad placement in the broadcast. You can get in front of an audience that a lot of advertisers and marketing companies just in general have had a hard time getting in front of. So that's a great opportunity as well. For me personally, I am all in on the infrastructure side. So for example, you might not be an airline expert, but you can probably name a few leading airline tech companies that handle ticket sales and things like that. Same for hotels, same for transportation. So I look at the esports space and I see a lack of services and tools that is actually being used for these small organizations that are starting. And so really at a high level, my kind of goal is to become a household name in esports, to where even if you don't know anything about esports, you go, yeah, I've heard of that company, and yeah, maybe I don't use it, but at least I know about it. So that's kind of where my personal strategy is directed towards, is just providing that infrastructure and becoming a stay, I guess, in the space itself.
What is infrastructure? Like what examples are that?
Yeah, so for example, Origin specifically is, well, let me back up. If you're creating a team, there's all sorts of things you have to do. You have to create your website, you have to manage your social, you have to build graphics, you have to go recruit the players, you have to practice, you have to do all of these things to actually create and support an organization. My concept is to say, look, we will take care of everything on the technical side for you. You practice and recruit players, that's it. We'll handle everything else. So like that, for example. Some other ideas that you could talk about are, okay, all of these esports teams have to travel to get to physical locations. There's tons of headache with dealing with all that. Someone's got to be a manager to actually handle that. If I'm a sponsor looking to sponsor, if I'm an advertiser looking to buy advertising, I have to go manually search through all of these things. There is nothing that I can really go to that says, hey, this is a good person to sponsor, advertise, whatever. So that's another concept that I've kind of messed around with a little bit. But just as a whole, it's just a very raw industry. Like no one is sure where, like kind of what's precisely going on. And so over the next few years, you're going to start to see templates or just more standard procedures for everything involved in the industry. And so does that answer the question? Yeah. So again, I appreciate you guys coming. Feel free to hit me up anytime. I'm around the office, social media, all that stuff. I'll actually be launching Origin. It was supposed to be on Jan 1, but we got a little bit delayed, so it'll probably be on Monday, actually. So feel free to check that out when you get an opportunity. But yeah, I love the space. You'll see me gaming in my office quite a bit.
Where are you?
Right back over there. Yeah, 48. So yeah, that's it. Any questions?
So how do you become an owner in this because for like a lot of the big like NFL, NBA guys, like big net worth guys, like can you just like start a team and whenever you want, or like how would that work?
Yeah, so so it's two things, right? You can either start your own or you can invest or buy one. If you were to start your own, that's a long, grueling process, just like basically starting any other company. In terms of investing, that's where it's kind of that arbitrage opportunity exists. There is no public list that you can go search and peruse who you want to buy. Like, you have to go make those connections and do your own research and figure out what are the important statistics to you to make an investment. The good news is that tier 2 teams, there's like this massive gap between those top teams and the tier 2 teams. Those tier 1 teams, $20 million. Tier 2 teams, 100,000, 50,000, 10,000. It depends on what the needs of the organization are. So you look at these teams, and for me, if I'm evaluating a team, I want to know, just like I would if I was investing in another company, what's their management structure like? So are the guys that are involved in managing everything, are they diligent, thoughtful people, good guys that you can trust and know that you don't have to micromanage every little thing they do? Similar to the way you might think about a sports team, their in-game performance is important, but for me, I don't even see that. That's maybe like 10 or 15% of the pie. Just like if you look at like the NFL, I hope none of you guys are Browns fans, but clearly the Browns management and their ownership and the structure of their organization is just not very good, and it shows up on the field, whereas those teams that have that solid infrastructure in place tend to have much better on-field performance. So when I'm evaluating which teams I want to be involved with, that's kind of what I look at.
Are franchises just playing one game, or they have a bunch of game teams?
That's a great question. So both. Some franchises are only one game specific. Other larger organizations have teams that compete in multiple games. One thing that can be a little bit confusing is that you'll have a hierarchy. So you'll have, for example, Complexity Gaming, and they have subsidiaries for each game. So for example, they'll have a League of Legends team that's called the Houston Shock or whatever it is. And then we'll have another team called for Dota, the San Francisco Blazers, whatever. And so if you're just like looking at it, you could get confused and not necessarily know that those organizations are tied to the bigger one. But you'd figure it out if you just look at the website or whatever.
How much are the gamers getting paid?
Excuse me?
How much are the gamers getting paid?
It depends. So typically what I've seen is if you're a competitive player placing, not necessarily winning, but placing, you'd be on a salary of probably like $1,000 a month. That's assuming that you're a remote player that is just staying at home and you only travel to tournaments from like wherever you live. If you're on one of the major franchises, you're probably making $100,000 a year with incentives based on how much you earn in tournament play. And if you're one of those guys, you're living at a mansion in Los Angeles where they have everybody living and practicing together. Interestingly enough, the career lifespan for esports players is really short. Your eyeballs wear out. So like there's like this like window that's like about 4 years where you've got like your prime competition opportunity. And then after that, like your eye reflexes just get so worn out that you can't quite compete at a high level, and usually those guys transition either into ownership or investing or management or whatever. There was one more other thing. I can't remember what I was going to say, but
what are some of the services you're launching with when you do go live?
With Origin? So Origin is basically Shopify plus LinkedIn for esports. So at a very low level, we're saying, hey, we'll handle your web platform. Because right now, if you want to create your esports website, you got to go to Wix, you got to go to Shopify, and those things are fine, like they're pretty good, but they're just not made specifically for it. And so you kind of have to like rig their features to suit the needs of an esports organization. And so I don't think that like creating websites is like the end goal, but at the same time, I'm really big on like underlying business fundamentals. So I want to create a product that I can sell and get revenue in. And we kind of move more into the more pie in the sky, explosive growth type of opportunities. Talking about Peter Thiel, he always says, do things that don't scale. And so I'm okay with having a little bit of an agency service. I'm okay with that to figure out, okay, we'll build software for this, that, the other thing.
That's a good way to keep your pulse on the customers. Yeah.
Exactly. So right now I've got like 15 or 20 customers, and I say I'm the CTO. I'm really probably more of the product officer because I've spent so much time dealing with our customers, getting feedback that implementing code is probably only 5 or 10% of what I do.
How many gamers are there?
In the world?
Yeah, for the market. In terms of gamers, like you said, there's a lot of viewers, but how many actual gamers that would need the infrastructure?
That would need the infrastructure. Right now, it's probably 500,000 that actually need the infrastructure. About 500,000, and we expect that to grow exponentially as all of this stuff takes off. I think you have the gaming total population as a whole is much, much larger, but that's just people just playing for fun on the weekends, whatever. They're not necessarily interested in like getting super competitive with it. So yeah, 500,000 for people that are like focused and are actually, hey, I want to be in this industry. Way more than that, hundreds of millions that just buy a game and play it and whatever.
Are you getting into video streaming of these things yourself as an infrastructure player?
No, so streaming on Twitch specifically, I don't have any business plans for that. That resides in my marketing plan. So we are building our Origin channel with the intent to stream on it, but not as a revenue generator or business piece, but more as a marketing tool. So for example, if we host a large event like a tournament, we'd stream it there and everyone would come watch it there. That'd be the only place that people could watch it. And then of course it's brought to you by Origin and all that stuff.
Who's supporting you?
Excuse me?
Who's supporting you financially? Kind of getting it?
I'm self-funded right now with Origin. One lesson that I learned with Gamerwall was that we probably raised money a little bit too early. And so this time around, I'm going to make sure that we're at a good place revenue-wise so that we don't have to take money. Right, because if you need it really, really bad, it's a little bit harder to get it seems like. And so the idea here is that I don't plan to raise any money until we hit serious business metrics, either monthly revenue targets or significant user growth. What happened? There we go.
What's the barrier to entry?
Very, very low. No barrier to entry. If you want to start an esports team, so our pitch at Origin is create your esports empire in 5 minutes or less. So you'd come to Origin in 5 minutes, we'd set you up for free. That's how the funnel works, right? And then other features you'd upgrade. But if you wanted to get started, there's nothing that could stop you from getting started. So at a low level, it's very, very noisy, and you'll see little organizations pop up, and then as you'd expect, they're gone in 5 seconds because some 14-year-old kid is like, hey, I want to start an esports organization, and then they realize, wow, this is kind of like running a real business and is really, really hard. I'm going to quit. And so you do see a lot of that.
How are you doing recruiting? That seems like an interesting part of the business, is recruiting
for
the gamers.
Oh, for the gamers?
Yeah, for tier 1, tier 2.
Yeah, so going to talk about infrastructure, that's another really great opportunity. If I'm a team, how do I go find players to play for me? It's really hard, right? There's only so many official events that you can go scan, and all those guys that are competing in official events, they're already on a team. So finding players is actually really, really challenging.
You mean they're not on LinkedIn?
Yeah, exactly, right? That's where Origin's going, right? So Origin allows teams to set up as well as individual player profiles. So the idea being that we create the team platform. We have the individual player platform, which allows them to put their accomplishments, their statistics, and of course the teams can browse through all of that. And if they decide to hire one of those guys, just drag them right onto their team roster. But yeah, there's nothing.
Does that happen a lot? Like people moving from team to team within the top tier teams?
Yeah, guys get, just like in pro sports, guys get in beef with their ownership, or they don't get paid on time, or something happens, or they just don't like their buddies, or whatever it is, and they become free agents. Most of the contracts I've seen they roll on a 6-month basis. Some of the really good guys are like a year or 2 years. But yeah, I mean,
Is it all free agency or is trading a thing?
There is no like.
Right, because you
Esports Players Association, right? So like these guys,
sense,
these guys are like totally, they're totally unrepresented, and so you do see like bad actors out there that take advantage of players and stuff like that. So talk about going back to infrastructure, another opportunity. There's nothing really that helps the players protect themselves. And so, yeah, as far as trades go, I can't say that I've ever seen one, but I'm sure it happens just like kind of under the table.
Right.
But yeah, if
because it would probably be illegal,
right,
without a head organization.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you like on social media, a lot of the accounts I follow, of course, are in the space, and so you'll see, hey, retweets of some guy that is now a free agent. Hey, here's my accomplishments. Looking for team. Let me know. And those guys field probably thousands of offers from the 14-year-old kid that just started his esports team. And he's like, hey, you want to come play for me? And he's like, yeah, you got to pay me $2,000 a month. And the kid's like, oh, no, yeah, dang it. And so, yeah, it's just a really, really raw space. And probably in the next five years, maybe even sooner than that, you're going to start to see like the Esports Players Association, where like now, if you're going to compete in registered tournaments, you actually have to be part of like the union organization, and then there's rules about signing the players and all that stuff, but it doesn't exist yet.
What's Twitch work? What is it?
Twitch?
Yeah. What does it do?
Twitch is literally just live broadcasting of gameplay. So most often what you'll see is a face cam, so someone sitting at their computer and then the camera's pointed at their face, and then you see the game like as an overlay underneath it. And so people will play, and so you're watching them play, and then you're also seeing their facial expressions, and they're talking you through what they're playing. Some guys just have like really entertaining.
The game's not being played on Twitch. Twitch is just connecting with your computer and showing what your computer's showing?
Correct.
Okay.
Twitch actually is an interesting story. It was started as, I think it was called Justin TV. And it was like, if y'all remember that movie Ed TV, it's like almost the same thing. This guy was like, yeah, I just want to create a service that like I can film and like people can see what I'm doing at any moment in time. And then somehow they ended up pivoting to gaming, and they were acquired. They got bought by Amazon for $1 billion in 2014, which at the time it's like seemed crazy. But like now, if they were a standalone organization, they'd, I don't know, probably be worth like 10 or 15 billion.
Because they're are they making money how?
Mostly through advertising. There's all sorts of like, so for example, if I watch a stream, I have the option to subscribe to that stream for 5, 10, 25, whatever the host of the channel wants, and Twitch splits that revenue with the content creator.
Why would you subscribe to a screen that you can see anytime?
It's a really good question. So I've only subscribed to 2 channels, and here's why I did it. I had checked in on this one channel for like 6 months. I'd been consuming his content for free for forever.
And he's a good player.
Yeah, he's good, and he was really entertaining. Like I got a lot of value out of it, and so he just kind of broke down my pay barrier. And I was like, you know what? This guy's really kind of earned it. I'm probably maybe different than most people, but like I always buy all my music, right? I don't ever like stream it. Like I just buy it on iTunes or whatever. So if I like something, I'll pay for it. But to your point, a lot of people never do, right? I mean, you in theory can just watch it for free. You're gonna get hit with ad impressions and all that stuff. So like they're still monetizing your eyeballs, but you certainly don't have to pay if you don't want to.
And does Switch pay the player for the advertisement that goes on when he's playing?
Yeah, they have different tier levels. Like if a player, like if you're just getting started, they're not going to give you anything. But over time, if you establish yourself and get enough people actually watching, then yeah, they'll start to compensate you. Kind of the way YouTube does it, actually, where hey, if Ford puts a commercial on your channel, then you get a piece of whatever that Ford had to pay Twitch.
Does that revenue generally go to the players, or does it go to the team owners? Or is there?
So usually the way the exposure I've had to the contracts between teams and players is that the players get a salary plus like 90% of any prize pool winnings. The teams get all of the sponsorship and additional revenue that comes around it. So like the agreement is kind of like, you guys go play, we'll compensate you for your time playing. If you win, you get paid even more. But like when we put a patch on your jersey, like we're getting the revenue from that. Same if we're broadcasting you guys playing, we're getting revenue from that, all that stuff. All right, awesome. Well, again, I really appreciate you guys coming. I love this space. So seriously, anytime you want to come, just knock on the door. If you see my headsets on, try not to like knock too loud, 'cause, like, scare me, then I'll shoot somebody on the screen. Yeah, anything you guys ever have any questions or just curious or whatever, I always love to talk about it.
Well, how about sports teams?
Sports teams?
Sports games. Is that not?
Yeah, so it's interesting, so this is like, it's kind of like a snobby thing, but like the hardcore esports players are like, that's not esports, that's a sports simulation game. And so like there are competitions around those games, like Madden and FIFA. Like I actually just saw this, FIFA and EA Sports just agreed with somebody for the World Cup, the FIFA. It's like they're running it just like they run the World Cup, but only in FIFA, and they're broadcasting that on TV and stuff. But like the guys that play like League of Legends, they like hold their nose up at that stuff because they're like, it's on the console and like it's not its own creation. Like that's just a simulation of another game, right? Like League of Legends isn't a simulation of another game. Like it's its own creation, and so it's like in theory it's the exact same thing, but the guys who are really into it like hold their nose up at it. I grew up playing Madden and FIFA. Like that's all I played up until about 2 years ago. I didn't even get into PC gaming until about 2 years ago. Now I'm all about it, right? Because if you think about it, a console costs what, $300? And so what kind of computer can you build with $300, right? I mean, I probably spent maybe $1,500 on my machine. It's like my components are much, much better. So like I can play games at a higher frame rate, way more detailed. Everything's much, much better. Whereas on a console, everything has to be limited because of the hardware. And so, yeah, I've become one of the snobs as well. People are like, yeah, you want to come play my console? I'm like, nah, man, sorry. I've got this really awesome machine.
I like that you threw out Command and Conquer. I haven't played that.
Man, StarCraft, it's just like Command and Conquer, except you can play people online. It's the same deal. Like
we used to have a LAN network, and we'd wire up Command and Conquer as well as all kinds of other old games like that. And I remember playing that through 1 through 3.
Yeah, Red Alert.
Yeah, Red Alert.
Red Alert was so amazing.
I haven't heard that stuff in so long.
Yeah. And StarCraft, so if you go to Twitch, you'll see StarCraft players playing, and it's the exact same thing. It just takes place in space. I think they made a Command and Conquer. Oh yeah, Tiberian Sun.
Yep. Yeah. And then I played into the StarCraft. I never played the new one.
Okay, yeah.
By that time, I was like, okay, the kids are too good these days.
Oh man, it's crazy. They're so good. You know the stats that they track for some of these games. Like I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's like clicks per second or something like that. And so like the really, really good like League of Legends and StarCraft players, like their clicks per second is like off the charts, right? It's like
at their point that they were like all hotkeys, and they're just like these blasted things.
Yeah, it's both. Yeah, and they count both, right? It's like
Yeah,
keys, and so it's like they do that, and then they'll put like little measurement devices on the machines that look at their eyes and how quickly their eyes are going over the screen, because like how much information you can consume on the screen is like a really important factor in how you process and make decisions in live time. So they'll look at these dudes' eyes and be like, oh my god, this guy's eye movement is off the charts, like we want this guy. And then going back to why they wear out, I mean your eyes are just such a like weak muscle group that like they literally just wear out, and you cannot move your eyes back and forth as fast after like a pretty short.
Love to watch a CAT scan of like somebody's brain while they're doing it.
Oh man, they do that. They'll show heat maps of like what's getting activated. Yeah, and it's just like it's pretty crazy. Yeah, all the stuff going on. It's just I've been in it so deep now that I guess I kind of get. It's good for me to do these things because I'm so into it that it's hard for me sometimes like talk to someone who doesn't know anything about it, because they're like, wait, what? I'm like, man, I'm sorry, I'm in too deep. I need to I need to pull myself back a little bit and see it from someone who isn't so involved. Just.
Have you seen any blockchain stuff come down that looks legitimate or applicable at all to the industry?
Yeah, so it's actually a really like good fit. So I think what I see as crypto, you said blockchain, right?
Blockchain.
Yeah. So like as far as like the actual blockchain infrastructure, like not really. Most of it's relied on like using one of the currencies as
Right,
some
so I
sort
see
of
that
tool.
being super applicable. And I think there's some that are like trying to launch currencies within in-game scenarios, which is still
Yeah, it's it's really raw and wild. I think where I see the opportunity for cryptocurrencies in gaming, and really this isn't just applicable to gaming. It could be applicable to a lot of things, but is that because the transaction fees for like making purchases with cryptos are so low. Like right now on Twitch, if I have to subscribe for $4.99 a month, but like a big part of the reason that businesses do that is because they have to pay like 2.5% transaction fee. So like I can totally see a world where, okay, you set up your crypto wallet to something and then you want this piece of content, great, it's 0.0001 cents. And like before you could have never done that because transaction fees, but now that there aren't, you could like sell micro content or like micro loot crates and things like that, right? Like in theory, a game can't sell anything for 1 cent in-game purchase because, well, you have to pay 10 cents to the credit card companies. Like anything has to be at least over $1 basically for even a credit card to be applicable. So like I think that's a big opportunity.
That's a good point.
So when guys do go pro, is there like a certain age range, or when anyone, not even guys, do they fall into a specific demographic? When you were talking about their eye movement and making decisions in real time, like that's real decisional analysis. Like, do they go into like a certain field after? Like, what happens when your esports career is done?
Yeah, as a competitive player, the best analogy I can use is it's like women's gymnastics, right? So you see these gymnasts go to the Olympics and they're like 15 years old. Like if you see like an 18-year-old gymnast, they're like, oh my God, they're ancient now.
It's that one Romanian last year. Remember that? She was 42 and still
what?
competing. It was insane.
Geez, and there's that other girl, Ali Reisman or whatever.
Right.
She's like 23, God forbid. She's 23, oh my God.
42-year-old didn't win.
Right.
But like she competed at a high level.
Yeah. And so after your competitive career's over, depending on how successful you were, it opens up a lot of doors for you in the management side of things, ownership. If you had some money to invest now, you're like on the inside, you're going to get exposure to deals that basically no one else would. I think just like sports, even if, let's say that you're not even a former pro player and you really want to get actively involved in an operational capacity, but you're not going to ever be good enough to be a pro player yourself. Like for example, every organization needs a manager for each team, and that manager's duties are very similar to a manager for any other sport. They got to make sure all these guys are taken care of, salaries, food, drinks, all that stuff, travel arrangements. So like people have opportunities to get involved, even if they're not going to be like a pro player, right? Like I'll just never be good enough to compete at a high level. So like, yeah, I'll still play, like to make sure I know what I'm talking about if we're talking about the games, but there's opportunities like all over the place outside of actually competing yourself.
Cool. So when some of those larger VC firms get involved, are they like sponsoring teams, or are they sponsoring leagues, or are they, how do they get involved, I guess?
Yep. So yes to all of those. Depending on what the firm specializes in, some of them only get involved. Like some of these would only be interested in investing in a company like Origin. Like they're like, we don't want anything to do with the teams, the franchises. We want to be involved in the businesses that are in the space. Whereas other firms, which a lot of times are also owned by the sports team owners, they're like, we actually want to own the franchise because, if I'm Robert Kraft, I'm looking at the NFL, I'm like, okay, these franchises are $3 billion now, like I'm not going to buy another one, or right? Yeah, and so like they see a $20 million esports franchise, and even if that's like, in my opinion, that's like crazy, that it's hard for me to see how those teams are going to immediately substantiate that type of valuation in the near future. I mean, obviously Robert Kraft is a smart guy, but for them, they're like, okay, I can own my own franchise, and they see the stats, right, of the industry as a whole, and like, I can own a franchise for $20 million, like done.
It's like Tim Ferriera, or however you say his last name, for the Rockets.
Yeah.
Bought him for like $2 billion, but he barely missed out on buying him the first time back in '91 when he was competing for the previous owner. But with his offer of like $82 million.
Oh my God, it just makes
the previous owner bought him for like $85 million.
Yeah, and so I mean, in theory, right, in 20 years, like hopefully it's the same thing. Hopefully in 20 years, Robert Kraft is like, man, remember when I bought that esports team for $20 million and now
worth $1.5 billion.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. You know, one piece of this puzzle is like the fickleness of gamers. Like the NFL, yeah, okay, NFL maybe not a good example because all the head trauma, but like NBA, like basketball isn't going anywhere. Like that game is here, whereas these games are just like a digital thing. So like the company that produces this game, for whatever reason, could be like, we're done, and then all of a sudden that
shifts itself.
Say what?
The sport shifts itself.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so like games can come and go and disappear, and so like Twitch is actually really relevant because it allows you to see which games are actually like sticking and have like long-term potential. There's all sorts of issues that like create bad blood. Like for example, in PUBG, it's one of the most popular games. I get frustrated because there's a ton of cheaters in it, right? There's no cheaters in like the official competitions because they know who every player is. But like I'm playing the game, it's super hard to win as it is. Like yes, I'm in the top 10, I might win, and I get sniped from like 5,000 meters away by a guy who's like using an aimbot. I'm like, this is stupid. So it's like things like that. Like if they don't get that under control, I mean, is that game?
People will go off the game.
Yeah, is that like PUBG is like trying to work its way up as an official esports title, but are they going to make it? I don't know. I mean, if they have a massive cheating problem, maybe not. League of Legends and Dota, despite the fact that their graphics look like they're 20 years old, are still like up there. Like they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So like that's why those. Oh, and Overwatch. I didn't even really talk about Overwatch, but yeah, Overwatch. That's where. So Blizzard created Overwatch. They launched the game and they built, it was like, Overwatch is probably the first game that's built specifically for esports, right? There is no single player mode, it's only multiplayer. And so like from the get-go, they were already thinking like, we need this to be competitive. Now there's the Overwatch League, and that's what a lot of these guys are, they made investments in the Overwatch League. Yeah.
Do professional esports players jump from game to game?
Yes, but rarely. Like usually you're going to specialize in one just because it doesn't make sense for you to like split your time, be like a pitcher in baseball, like practicing batting. It just doesn't make sense for them.
I'm just curious because like, you see an NBA player, maybe not in the NFL, but there's NBA players that played 20 seasons.
Right.
The 20 seasons wouldn't make sense probably in an esport game.
No.
Right.
So I guess, so likewise, again, similar to sports, depending on what game you play, right? There's certain games that are very, very twitchy and require that, whereas Hearthstone is a turn-based card game. So like Hearthstone requires no eye muscle, right? So you could have a career in that for 50 years. What's funny about Hearthstone is that you're seeing a lot of the old poker players getting involved.
I was wondering
all the poker players, like Daniel Negreanu. If y'all know
Really?
Daniel Negreanu, yeah, he's a Hearthstone player and he kills it. He's really good because there's, just like in poker, there's a lot of like reading your opponent, like knowing what they're about to play and stuff like that. And so you're seeing some of the poker players like move over and start participating in Hearthstone, which is kind of cool.
It's a great presentation.
Man, yeah, I appreciate you guys coming. Yeah, again, anytime you want to talk about it, I always love to talk about it. Come hit me up. I'll be over there. If y'all game at all, let's game together, whatever.
What's your game of choice?
Right now it's probably